Hey everyone, and Aquaba. Welcome to You Ain't Imagining This. This is Amma Robin, your host and the storyteller, and I like to think your sister too. Here in this sanctuary, we create space to name the chaos of living Black in predominantly white spaces, and to remember that we don't have to carry it alone. And we all know what it is. Today's episode is part of our Believe Black People series. I'm really excited about that. And I want to just pause and remind you of what that means, of what the Believe Black People series is. These episodes are truth-telling episodes. Of course, I'm always telling the truth, but we get really real here. They're different from our folk tales and from the espresso talks and from our comforting moments. Believe Black People episodes are where we speak plainly. Frankly, we get 100. We tell the truth that too often gets denied or distorted, sometimes even diminished. They're not about soothing, though they can bring about some relief in their honesty. But these episodes are also not about metaphor, though I think metaphor is great, and stories still matter here. These episodes are about saying out loud what needs to be said. Every time and every kind of Yate episode has its place. The stories give us imagination. The espresso talks let us reflect together. The comforting moments restore our breath. And the Believe Black People episodes, they affirm our reality. They remind us that we are not imagining this, and that truth must be believed. And I'm going to go further too, and that the truth has to be said over and over and over again. So today's truth is, coping is not consent. Let me say it again. Coping is not consent. Coping is survival. Coping is not freedom. It's not endorsement. And it is not permission. You know, for generations, we have learned coping strategies just to stay alive, survive in systems that weren't designed for us to thrive, and sometimes not even for us to survive. We smile when things aren't funny. We code switch to make others feel comfortable. We overwork ourselves to prove that we belong. We carry silence so that we won't be labeled as angry. These are coping strategies. They help us get through. But too often, those outside of our community, and sometimes even those within, and I'm not judging anybody, look at our coping and mistake it for contentment, for it's all right, or it wasn't that bad. They see us surviving and decide that things must be okay, that because we can endure, the harm really wasn't that bad. And that is not true. That is a lie. Our ability to cope is not proof that the system is right or just or fair. Our resilience is not permission for oppression to continue. Coping is survival, and survival is not freedom. So let's get started. Let's start going deep. We got stuff to talk about. We got stuff to do. And I am so anxious and so excited to bring in the voice of one of our Yatetown elders. You're going to meet more of our Yatetown people and community in the next few weeks. But today, I want to introduce you to our Yatetown elder, Miss Geneva Carter. We think of her as our knowledge keeper, and she reminds us, and I'm quoting here now, our survival strategies are not proof that the system isn't killing us. Resilience is never consent. Resilience is never endorsement. And resilience is not a gift we give to our oppressors. It's how we protect ourselves and one another until we can be free from all of this. Thank you, Asante Sana, Miss Geneva. She always just says it, and I love to hear her talk, and she's a great listener too. I said, you're going to meet her more, spend more time with her in the next few weeks. And I gotta say, she is a truth teller. Part of why coping and resilience get confused with consent is because of how they look from the outside. As I said earlier, we smile, we laugh, we show up at work polished and prepared. We graduate with honors, we achieve, we excel, we lead. People say, see, they're doing fine. They're succeeding. The playing field is fair because look at what they're accomplishing. What they don't see is the migraines, the high blood pressure, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the oppression, the shortened lifespans, the cost of carrying the coping tax day after day. So let's be clear. When you see us shining, and we shine a lot, don't assume that we're not struggling. When you see us coping, don't assume that we're consenting. Our coping keeps us alive, but it costs us a lot. And I gotta say, Miss Geneva said it well, and it made me think of this from my own life. And I'll just tell a short story because it really did bring this up for me. In college, I had this incident that showed exactly what coping can cost. I was taking a class that I loved. It was called Library and Information Science. Now, I'm a writer and a reader, so the library is my place. And so to take a Library and Information Science class was like heaven to me. And I really loved those classes. There was one particular class that I was taking, and I had prepared carefully for a presentation that I had to make. I walked in excited because I had worked so hard on it and prepared so much. But unfortunately, I had misunderstood part of the instructions. And right there, in front of the whole class, during my presentation, the professor began yelling at me. She became hysterical and really started insulting me. And she threatened to fail me if I didn't fix everything by the next class session. And that was going to be in 2 days. It was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. She was loud and angry and humiliating. And I said insulting and demeaning. I'd even go so far as to say abusive. Well, I sat down. I grabbed my presentation and I sat down, shaking and silent and terrified. For the next 48 hours, for the next 2 days, I pushed myself to redo the assignment. I stayed up. I worked endlessly. I held in my feelings and I isolated myself. I worked constantly. Coffee, NoDoz, remember NoDoz back then, way back then? I was working, and not in a way that, wow, this is exciting to do, in a, oh my God, I better do this, or I'm going to be kicked out of class and humiliated again. And I was just working and shaking and scared. It was a tough time. But I did complete the assignment. When I returned, I delivered an excellent presentation, and I received a top grade. The professor admitted it was a very good presentation. She applauded. But this professor never mentioned her behavior, her abusive behavior in the previous class. Other students even said that it was great that I didn't let it affect me. Wow. They didn't see that it had affected me. They didn't see that I was crying afterwards and pushing myself and shaking, that I developed a terrible headache and even became sick afterwards, developed a really bad cold afterwards. But I had coped. That's right. And I completed the assignment and done a great job, and I was shining. But I was also shaking. My coping, my silence, the overwork, the isolation, the pushing myself, even when I felt sick, got me through the project, but it left me traumatized and sick. That experience taught me something that I didn't yet have the words for. That coping can help you survive, but it's not proof that you're okay. And it's never consent to abuse. That, oh, well, she did all this, but I was okay, so what she did was okay. No. I'm going to come back to this at the end of the episode to share the lessons that I've taken from that moment, for that incident, and how I would choose to handle it differently today. Because as I think about this now, I'm shaking about this, and it's a difficult memory. But I have learned something from it, and I do want to share this with you. But I want to get to some other information first and some other content. Well, let's move on. But, as I said, even now, I'm remembering this incident that happened in college, way back in college. My body is still reacting. My breath is getting shallow and quickening, and I feel my hands shaking a little bit, and I'm sweating. I know that these are stress or trauma reactions, and so I'm going to take some steps afterwards to calm this down. And when I see other Black people experiencing these kinds of incidents, Black people, students being yelled at by teachers, and I do see that, or followed in stores, including myself, harassed by police or security, or even dismissed by so-called friends, I know what's happening, how they're feeling inside, because I know how I felt inside. Even if the outside world isn't seeing it, I see it, and I know they're feeling it. We all cope by trying to stay quiet, by smiling, by holding our breath, by walking away. And outsiders then look at that coping and assume that they weren't scared or humiliated or deeply hurt. For instance, just like in my incident when I fell down in the parking lot, well, people could have looked at me and thought, oh, she's fine. She's picking up her groceries and getting out of there, and she's okay. But I was far from okay. I was just coping. But I know how others are affected too when these incidents happen, because they happen to me. We are all just coping, just to survive the moment. We're taught to cope this way because so often there's no one coming to help us. Just like I said about falling down in the parking lot, no one came to help me. There's no one standing up for us. And I believe that this does actually go back to slavery, when we couldn't show our fear or pain. Oh, we don't even want to talk about our anger. And during Jim Crow, when we had to swallow our rage and our terror just to avoid violence. And there was a lot of violence against us. What also makes me especially angry is to see how this is expected even from children. Yeah, 6-year-old black children have been handcuffed in class, severely punished at school, humiliated, yelled at, isolated. And what do people say? Oh, he handled it well. And that is because they coped. They learned how to cope. But coping is not okay when a child is being abused. That's wrong. It was wrong then. It's wrong now. It is wrong always. I don't care how the child is reacting. My story, as you can see, is just one example. But I know so many of you listening have your own versions, your own incidents, and you coped through those because you had to survive the moment. You had to get through the moment. Times when you smiled or stayed quiet or pushed harder just to survive, only to feel that toll in your body, in your spirit, and in your health. This is why we have to say it plainly and clearly and constantly. Coping is not consent. I don't know if you listened to my previous episode of Yate, because I mentioned a folk tale about villagers carrying stones. Some of those stones were really holding them down and bending their backs and keeping them from sleeping well and all of that. And these stones were metaphors for things like silence, for fear, for proving ourselves again and again. And some of the stones represented burdens that we carried that were never ours. Maybe they were from a previous generation, from our parents or grandparents, or even further back. When Amara, who was the protagonist in the story, decided to lay her stones down in the river, she showed us what release could look like and feel like. And then the whole village followed, and it became not just individual coping, but collective coping. And that is what we need now, to move from coping alone to get to the moment, to coping together, from barely surviving to building systems of care and joy and restoration. Coping is necessary, but collective coping strategies can turn survival into resistance, and resistance into freedom work. And that just lifts me up. Yes, there is a place and a time for coping, and there are different kinds of coping, and I mentioned this in the previous episode. But we also have to look at the kind of coping we're doing and how it's affecting us. And I think maybe now's a good time to look at what we can do, other ways we can cope, healthy forms of coping. So let's get to that. What do we do with this truth that coping is not consent? Yeah, what do we do? Now what? Well, I never leave you hanging, so here are some actions that we can take. Number 1, name it. Name it. Say out loud when you're coping. Say out loud when you're coping. Notice it in yourself. Call it what it is. People look at you and say, she's fine. You could say, no, I'm not. I'm just coping with this right now. Number 2, refuse silence. Don't let others mistake your coping for agreement. You don't have to tell everything, but when you can, let people know, look, I'm just getting through this. It doesn't mean it's okay with me at all. I'm just trying to get through this now. Number 3, release what isn't yours. Just like Amara in the folk tale, identify one stone that you don't need to carry. Maybe it's guilt or silence or overwork or fear. And place it down, put it down in ritual or in journaling or in prayer. And I love the thought of putting it down in community. Number 4, build healthy coping practices. Replace high-effort coping, that's what we're talking about here, with life-giving practices. Rest, music, movement, cultural rituals, porch talks, therapy, laughter. There are a lot of healthy ways to cope that is not just survival coping. And maybe you should have a toolkit so that you can pull them out. They're easy to pull out whenever you need them. Because once you're in the moment, it's hard to think of it. But maybe you just think, okay, or you carry your journal with you. Actually, I carry my journal with me almost everywhere, so I do that quite a lot. Or to pray, or to breathe. You always have your breath. We'll move on. Number 5, strengthen collective care. Please, please, please don't just cope alone. Share the load and check in with your people. Check on your people. Cook together. Create rest spaces. Talk back to the myth that we must always be strong as individuals. You know how I really hate that rugged individualism, toxic masculinity and all of that? No, doesn't work. And it is a myth. Create collective care. And number 6, challenge the narrative. When people mistake coping for consent, correct them. Remind them our survival doesn't mean justice has been served. These actions, are not about perfection. They're about awareness and about reclaiming our right to live, to our humanness, and not just to our survival. So I do want to just briefly return before closing out to the story of that college incident that I had, and that was really humiliating and everything. At the time, my only tools were survival coping, the silence, the overwork, and the isolation. And yes, it got me through, but it also left me sick and traumatized, even decades later, feeling the trembling. Now, if I had known about healthier coping then, I might have handled it differently. In fact, I think I would have. I could have stepped outside afterwards and released my feelings instead of bottling them up. I could have reached out to a friend or to a mentor, another professor. I had some professors who were mentors, just so I wasn't carrying this alone. I could have made sure to eat properly, to rest, even with this strict deadline, to take a few minutes to rest and to breathe, to protect my body even while I worked. I might have written down what happened and reported the professor's behavior. Yeah, of course, I'm thinking about journaling too, but now I'm also talking about using the system, reporting the professor's behavior. And most importantly, I could have reminded myself that her outburst wasn't a reflection of my worth, that this was actually a reflection of hers. But I didn't have those tools then, but I have them now. And I share this because I want you to know survival coping is not the end of the story. We can learn healthier coping. We can practice release. We can protect ourselves and each other in new and healthier ways. And that's why I'm taking this extra time to build Yatetown. I know you haven't seen it yet. It has not fully constructed, but it's coming soon, really in a few weeks. And it's a place where coping is seen for what it is, survival, but where we also imagine and practice something beyond survival. In Yatetown, we'll sit on porches where we can shake the day off. We'll gather in gardens where rest is honored. We'll walk to the river where we can lay the stones down. We'll enter bookstores where truth is documented and protected. Yatetown is not a fantasy. It's a blueprint. And I promise it's coming soon. So please, be sure to subscribe so you'll receive all the notices and, of course, your welcome message. And let's also remember that naming coping isn't just for ourselves. It's for each other, for our friends, our family, our children. If you see a friend coping through silence, don't assume they're okay. Check in with them. If you notice a child coping with harm or insults, Don't ignore it. Step in, ask questions, protect them. Coping helps us survive, but community helps us live. And when we witness each other's coping and refuse to let it be mistaken for consent, we build together a culture of care that oppression cannot erase or diminish. This is liberation work here. So we've talked about a lot today, so I think it is time to wind it down. I want to leave you, though, with this, that coping is necessary. It has kept us alive. But coping is not consent. Our resilience is not permission. And I'm grateful and thankful for those coping tools that we have had, that I've been able to use, because they've helped me to survive, helped me to get through those moments. But it wasn't the rest. There wasn't enough of the story. We deserve more than survival. We deserve joy and rest and freedom and respect and an abundant life. So this week, take a moment to notice your coping, to name it, to release one stone, and remind yourself and anyone who tries to twist your resilience that survival is not freedom and coping is not consent. Before we close, I want to invite you to a short ritual of release. It'll take 1 minute. So place your hand over your heart. Take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, name one coping stone that you're carrying today. Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's proving yourself. Maybe it's exhaustion or overwork. Now take another deep breath. And as you exhale, imagine setting that stone down. Maybe not forever. Maybe just for this moment. But just for this moment. Just to feel your shoulders lighten, your chest open, and your spirit breathe. You don't have to carry it alone, and you don't have to carry it all the time. Asante Sana for being with me, for being in the building, for staying around for this entire episode, because I hope that it enriched you. It has definitely enriched me. This has been a Believe Black People part of You Ain't Imagining This. I'm Amma Robin. Again, Asante Sana. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for carrying this truth into the world. Until next time, remember, you don't have to carry it alone, and you ain't imagining this. Ashe, community.